Baruch Hashem, we are live. I really want to be in bed sleeping right now, but this is the only time, probably the only time we're going to get, so here it goes. In the future, the nations of the world will usurp the Torah and proclaim, "We are the true Israel." This is from one of Rabbi Reuben's lectures from a couple of years ago that, coincidentally enough, was posted on his Shorts channel, Rabbi Reuben Short Torah Clips, this week. And we posted a short, vertical format short on this channel talking about Xmas and fake holidays and what is the truth and what is lies. And it's like some people don't even hear or see what is being said. Their eyes are covered over and their ears are sealed shut. Their hearts are uncircumcised. This prophecy is from Midrash Tanchuma from 1,000 years ago, saying that something completely insane will happen in the end of days, in the era of Mashiach, where all the nations who had persecuted Israel for thousands of years, the Greeks, the Romans, the Christians, they will all come and say that they are the true Israel. They will start observing Jewish holidays and doing all kinds of completely insane things that make absolutely no sense whatsoever. And if you want to be a Jew, convert. That's not going to be easy. Hasn't been easy for me, and I'm still on like first grade level, way light years away. But at least it's the truth. You know, one thing we talked about last stream was what we need our study guides. Chokmah, Binah, and Da'at. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Now, Chokmah is information that we acquired or we learn from a teacher. Binah is things that we can deduce from this compiled wisdom or information that we collect or we learn from someone. And Da'at is taking that information and then applying it. That's what the truth is. The emet. The truth forces a person to act, to change their life. Now, we learned this amazing insight from the Book of Our Heritage by Rabbi Eliyahu Kito. And in it, he brings a teaching of the sages from Parashat Bereshit, the book of Genesis, chapter 1. And the sages say, where is Hanukkah in the Torah? Where is it in the 5 books of Moses? Because the sages teach that everything is in the Torah. Absolutely everything. Everything that's already happened, everything that will ever happen until the end of days, like the very, very end. And of course, Chanukah is alluded to, at least in the Torah. From the first word, Bereshit, you can count 25 words. On the 25th word is or, the Hebrew word or. It's highlighted there in yellow, alluding to the light of the menorah that would be kindled on the 25th of Kislev in the celebration of defeating the Yesharim, the Greeks. And the insane thing is that most people have no clue what anything is about. They don't know history, they don't know heritage, they don't know anything. They just do things because it looks cozy, it looks nice, it looks, they pick and choose like a salad bar or a smorgasbord, like you're at Old Country Buffet. Just do whatever suits them, thinking that that's, you really think that that's how God runs his world. The creation, everything is so precise and fine-tuned and has so many laws down to the most minuscule and microscopic things. You really think God is just going to let everyone have a smorgasbord, a free-for-all? Absolutely not. God has laws, and there are judges, God's generals in the world, which are the Jewish sages from the Talmud. Now, if they bring such great wisdom, such things that are basically a prophecy, that proves that they are God's generals in this war for the truth, and we have to do what they say, all of it, and not pick and choose whatever we want to. This proves many things. One is that the Torah has never been and will never be changed. The Jewish sages are not only very wise, they are God's generals appointed to disseminate and guard the Torah from heretics that would destroy it, just like the Greeks tried to do. That's what the whole battle of Hanukkah was over. The Greeks came and tried to destroy the truth. Greeks had no problem with the written Torah. None whatsoever. In fact, they liked it because they could twist it however they wanted to. But with the oral Torah, what people know as the Talmud, that solidifies things to where it's no longer malleable. There's an exact way to follow the law, and they did not like that. At first, after the Torah had been translated into Greek, the rulers have been delighted by it and were even inclined to forgive the pride shown by those who lived by its dictates. Later, however, the Torah became like a thorn in their side, and the subsequent Greek rulers resolved to uproot it from the hearts of those who were faithful to it. In doing so, they sought to subjugate Israel both physically and spiritually. Israel's Torah became a target for their arrows, and conflict erupted between the mighty Greek Empire and the weak, subjugated kingdom of Judah. The rulers of the Greeks were willing to accept most of the Torah, those parts that they imagined were possible to pour into Greek vessels. There were but three mitzvot, three commandments they sought to annul. If they were successful in abolishing these three, Shabbat, the sanctification of the months, and circumcision, the remaining mitzvot could be turned into enlightened but meaningless Greek rituals, which would eventually be forgotten. Shabbat serves to remind those who observe it, as well as those who see it being observed, that the world has a creator, and through his word, that which is not comes into existence. That which exists is turned back into naught. Shabbat, the Sabbath, proclaims, "Pay homage to your creator, let all the earth bow down to him." The Greeks declared, "Let Shabbat be uprooted and its memory forgotten. We are the masters of the world." and its inhabitants, only to us shall you prostrate yourselves. Goyim are forbidden to observe the Shabbat. Shabbat is only for Jews. Book of Exodus, chapter 31, verses 16 and 17. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. So when a non-Jew observes the Shabbat, unless they're in the process of conversion, they deny God's existence, the one and only God. The sanctification of the new months reminds all who sanctify them and all those who witness them being sanctified that God's power controls time. Not everything is fixed and dependent upon time, nor does time control those who live within its confines. Rather, everything depends upon the sanctity with which time is invested by those who fear God and fulfill his will. And the Bet Mikdash, if the Bet Din, if the court sanctifies the new month, it is sanctified and time itself becomes consecrated, invested with well springs of holiness which uplift both body and soul. If the Bet Din does not sanctify the month, then time remains the most mundane. Even if all the kings of East and West would gather and attempt to uplift a single soul from degradation to holiness, they would be unable to do so. The Greeks therefore proclaim the sanctification of the months shall be annulled and forgotten. We alone shall determine the times of celebration and festivity. We shall determine when to rejoice and when to grieve. Rabotai, this is what people do. I will decide when to celebrate. This is a comment left on a short that I did about how Christmas and everything related to the New Testament is idol worship, is Sol Invictus. This poor soul, I don't even know where to start. He doesn't celebrate Christmas because he feels like whoever the Lord is to him told his family to celebrate Hanukkah instead. But he still celebrates Jesus' birth, but not at Christmas, which is exactly what I said in the short in the stream, the last stream. The Christmas is Christmas in the Bible, or Christmas is not in the Bible, or is it? People do whatever they want to. They make up their own laws. They take whatever they want of the truth, and then mix in a bunch of lies. Even if it's all the truth, leaving one piece, one yud, one of the tiniest little Hebrew letters, you leave it out, then it is no longer the truth. Like we said, the emet is the truth from beginning to end. It is constant. It is complete. If you take the aleph out, it's no longer emet. It's met. It's death. And just like we said in the short, Jesus' birthday was at one time, and now it's on December 25th. Everything changes because it's sheker, it's lies. And we just learned this portion in the Tanakh, like right at the beginning of this week, about Yerovam ben Nevat, wicked king of Israel. First book of Kings, chapter 12. Now, Yerovam ben Nevat starts off really good. God splits Israel into the 10 northern tribes and the southern tribe of Judah and Benjamin. But Jeroboam is jealous. He is about to remove himself from the world and the world to come with his jealousy, because he cannot stand to see King Solomon's son be king in the Beit HaMikdash, when he and all his subjects would have to go and worship at the three festivals, the three pilgrimage festivals. Verse 32. We'll start in 31. He also made a temple of high places, and he appointed priests from the commoners of the people who were not of the children of Levi. Jeroboam also innovated a holiday in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, in imitation of the holiday in Judah, and brought offerings on the altar. He did the same in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves that he had made, the golden calves. He didn't believe in these things. He knew that they were idols. But still, due to his jealousy, he erected these false gods and said, "These are the gods that brought you out of Egypt, Israel." And at Bethel, he set up the priests of the high places that he had made. He ascended the altar that he had made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, in the month that he had fabricated with his own imagination. This is the sin that is almost greater than erecting the golden cows. To make a new festival, a chag, a chok, a new decree, is absolutely forbidden for everyone. And we've been dancing around this for the last few streams and haven't really got around to, why do you think there are no holidays for the Gentiles in the entire Tanakh? All the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings, there's not one holiday that God gives to the Gentiles. Not one. And this is one of the great evils of Christianity, is that God did not give holidays to the Gentiles because he wants us all to see the truth and desire to try to convert and become real Jews, not these fake Messianic half a Jew weirdos that pick and choose from God's truth like they're at some old country buffet. As we're supposed to feel alone and on the outside, like we have nowhere to go. But when a person picks and chooses and does all this hokey nonsense, even if they celebrate real holidays like Hanukkah or Pesach, but the most ridiculous thing is Hanukkah is not even in, like, it's not given by God in the Tanakh. It's a rabbinical holiday, and that's the complete insanity, is that people, and this is part of God's mercy to show us all how ridiculous we all are if we want to see the truth, if we desire to do something to change our life. But the sages say New Testament is 100% idolatry. And anyone that learns with a desire to know the truth quickly sees that, because God is not a man. God does not change. God is the faithful God. El Melech Ne'eman. Amen. That's what it means. It means faithful. And the God of the New Testament is a God that you cannot trust because he changes. And he has parts and pieces, and he's mutilated by the distorted, insane thoughts in people's heads. The steel that they make up to minimize the truth of God, to free themselves from any real work, and to delude themselves into thinking whatever they're doing is enough. And the sages say, most importantly, to absolve themselves from any obligation to stop committing sins, whatever sins they are. That's the only reason why a person humanizes God, is because if God is like me, if God has a body, if God has an arm, if God has anything other than the infinite, all-powerful, unique, one alone, Hashem, Hu Ha Elohim, and Od Novado. There's nothing else but the one and only God. If he's anything other than that, then maybe I don't have to do quite as much. Maybe I cannot change. Maybe I can give in to my Yesharim, evil inclination. That is Amalek. Amalek is the eternal enemy of God. Let's say it has this. Amalek has the same Gematria, the same numerical value as Safek, the Hebrew word for doubt. And as long as anyone in this world believes in anything other than the absolute truth of what people know as ultra-Orthodox Judaism and the only truth of the Torah, Amalek exists. For he said, because the Lord has sworn by his throne that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. I say to say, there's a specific reason why God chose to use these two words in this verse. They're highlighted in yellow at the end on the left there. Kes and Yud K. But it's hey, not K. God's names are so holy, you can't pronounce them as they're spelled with their letters. But Kes is throne, but it's not throne. It should be Kisei. Kisei Hashem, the throne of God. But the sages teach that as long as Amalek, as long as doubt in the one and only God exists in this world, his throne is incomplete and his name is incomplete. Until people know that Hashem, he is God. Amalek exists, and God is not in his full perception in this world. In the upper worlds, he is one and his name is one since the beginning of time to the end of time. There is nothing else. But down here in the world of lies, when people pick and choose the truth, when they make excuses and do whatever they want to, it literally mutilates perception of God and his majesty and his greatness. And nothing does that worse than trying to stuff the infinite and all-powerful God into a human body, a stinky, hairy meat sack that eats and goes to the bathroom. Yerovam ben Nevat, his sin was so severe that God wiped him and his all his descendants off the face of the earth. They are no more. All for making idol worship. For he sinned and he caused Israel to sin. And for making a new holiday. The Greeks sought to upend and abolish the act of circumcision, which reminds those who enter its covenant and those who see it being fulfilled that both body and soul are hewn from one source, just as a soul has links to the material world and is forced to exist within the limits imposed by its laws and is subject to its influence, so too does the body have links to the ethereal and is obligated to function according to its laws and dictates. Both worlds are one, the world of the Creator. Everyone that exists, everything that exists in this world and these worlds are his servants and obligated to fulfill his will. The Greeks therefore declared, this covenant shall be uprooted. Let its fulfillment not stand as a challenge to our wise men who say that there are two separate worlds. The body is the unrestrained ruler of one world, and there is nothing that stands in its way as it seeks to fulfill its desires. The spirit is the unrestrained ruler of the other world, and there is nothing that stands in its way as it ascends to the heights, singing its songs and dreaming its dreams. Body is not subservient to soul, and soul is not subservient to body. The body can be a pig, and the soul an angel. A world without a creator, a year devoid of sanctity, a body lacking restraint is anything more ugly. Images of external beauty and divine visions, conflagrations of desires replacing sanctification of the material. What value is this to this kind of life? Now the Greeks, and this is one of God's just numerous mercies, is that you can look at the art and culture of the Greeks, and you can see that it didn't fully die. The ancient Syrian Greeks that tried to wipe out the Torah and Israel, they faded away. They were conquered. But their ideology lives on. And you can see it in the Romans, and you can see it in the church all the way through today. All the art in the church is just disgusting, degenerate filth. Naked Greek statues. And the hate, the absolute hate of the oral Torah. Over 2,000 years, this ideology has sought to murder either physically or spiritually Jews and the Torah. And now this prophecy is being fulfilled. Where suddenly hundreds of thousands of goyim, of Gentiles, are flocking to the truth, but they're not taking all of it. They're taking only what they want. Part of the problem is there's so many liars out there. And if you just randomly scrolled across this on YouTube, you are extremely fortunate. Not that I'm something special. It's just I'm one of the few people that is willing to publicize the truth. And I learned from someone, my rabbi, Baruch Hashem, thank God for Rabbi Yaron Rubin. I mean, what I do on this channel is like next to nothing. And what he does is far, far greater than I will ever do. But still, it's not enough. 60,000 subscribers on YouTube in a world of 8 billion people, when most of them don't even watch his lectures, is not enough to help people. You know, God is so infinitely merciful. He gives us so many examples that we can learn from. One that I realized recently is there's multiple ones just in this one thing. Rat bait. Now, this is probably going to seem kind of gross, but it's no more disgusting than avodah zarah, than idol worship. Do you think the rat knows when it chews on this bait that is full of poison? I mean, they keep going back to the box over and over again. They'll steal big chunks and drag them off to their nest. But rats can't read. Rats can't read the ingredient list. And the thing is, if you look at the rat bait, there's food in there. Life-giving food. And that doesn't matter because it's full of poison. Doesn't matter how much truth is in something. If there's a little bit of poison in there, it's deadly. And it's true for rat bait, and it's even more true for the truth of God, for the Torah. It doesn't matter how much of the truth of the Old Testament, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings a person has. If it's not the Torah and only the Torah, it's poison. As soon as any Greek ideology is in there, as soon as any New Testament is in there, it's poison. As soon as there's any heresy or anything, any news, any politics, it turns the truth to lies. It just ruins it. It's worthless. You can't understand anything. I mean, you look closely, especially if you look at the scriptural Hebrew. There's so many things that don't make any kind of sense without the teaching of the Jewish sages. Hellenism. At first, the Greeks thought that they would be able to attract Jews toward their lifestyle through chicanery and without warfare. They won the hearts of the simple-minded people by giving them positions of responsibility in the state and in the Bet HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. They won the hearts of the simple-minded, appointing them as governors and princes and Kohanim Gedolim and administrators, elders, judges, and officers of the court. The Kohanim Gedolim, the high priests, the sages teach that the last, I think, 2 or 300 years, there was over 280 Kohanim Gedolim, 280 high priests, because of this, the dictates of the Greeks and then the Romans, because they would appoint, they had no clue of the holiness of the temple, that this was a place of the one and only God, and if you go in there and you don't have a pure mind, there is only death. Even just a stray thought, a Kohen Gadol would go in on Yom Kippur, and if his mind wasn't completely focused on the matter at hand of atonement for the nation, if he thought about that he's hungry because he's fasting and he stayed up the entire night the night before, and he's probably extremely tired, but if he had one stray thought, God would remove his soul and they would have to drag his body out with a chain. But they're so stupid, and all that, like it says, the simple-minded, they had no clue. They didn't believe the teaching of the sages. They thought that they were just power-hungry old men. They had no clue that they are the generals of God in his army for truth. These people formed a sect which became known as the Hellenists, and they assimilated Greek culture willingly. Their influence in the nation spread, and they incited the people to follow their example by abandoning the Torah and embracing Greek culture instead. They arranged orgies of licentiousness and dancing, built altars for the Greek idols, and offered sacrifices to them. The people passed their days with celebrations and entertainment, their minds enchanted by the magical splendor, their base desires pleasurably fulfilled. Nevertheless, the majority of the nation did not follow the lead of the Hellenists. Rather, they strengthened their commitment to the Torah of their forefathers, turning their backs on those who sought to entice them, looking upon them with animosity. They wept to God over their traitorous brothers and over the nation as a whole, who had been handed over to enemies from without and traitors from within. The wicked king Antiochus saw that the Hellenists had not been successful in consolidating power, that they were not sufficiently strict in enforcing their rule, and that they were outcasts in the eyes of their own compatriots. He therefore sent his armies, led by cruel officers, to either completely subjugate the Jews or slaughter them. When they arrived, they slaughtered and plundered, spreading desolation among the people and subjecting them to all sorts of persecution. They murdered tens of thousands of men, women, and children who sacrificed their lives for the Torah. Some of the people surrendered, prostrating themselves before Greek idols and joining in the celebrations. Some fled to the wilderness or hid in caves. The Hellenists assisted the enemy in tracking down those who had fled and in torturing those who had not, bringing them forcibly to the places of celebration where they were enticed by every sort of sin. They even turned the daughters of Israel over to the cruel enemy to be defiled. They then came to the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash. They suspended the daily offering and defiled the oil and the menorah. They constructed an altar sacrificing a pig whose blood was brought into the Holy of Holies. The people heard what had been done and trembled with great outrage and fear. The nation saw that there was no choice but to wage open war against their enemy and their traitorous brethren. The sages teach that, and this we learned this from Rabbi Reuben in the War of Amalek series earlier this year, and it doesn't make any sense logically. It's completely backwards. But when there's a spiritual attack, the only solution is a physical war. And when there is a spiritual attack, the only when there is a physical attack, the only solution is a spiritual war, meaning do teshuva, Teshuva, commonly translated in English as repentance, but is wholly insufficient for what teshuva is. Teshuva means returning to God, fixing everything that we failed at, everything that God says and that the sages explain to us, fixing it all, and only then can we return all the way to God. The early sages said the verse in the book of Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, and there was darkness upon the abyss, refers to the Greeks who darkened the eyes of Israel. This is the reason the sages ordained that lights be kindled on Hanukkah. Similarly, the sages interpreted the verse in Daniel chapter 2 verse 32, and its side was that of the serpent, as a reference to Greece. The serpent is ungrateful and does not admit that someone may have brought it benefit. The arrogant Greeks sought to eradicate Israel's sense of subjugation to God's will and their gratitude toward him, and to make them as haughty and ungrateful as they were. For this reason, the people of Israel declared additional thanksgiving over the miracle of their deliverance. And there's another passage in here on how strict God's judgment is. The Hasmoneans, the Hasmoneans, they were the ones that took up the fight. The only ones in Israel that physically were willing to literally go die to fight the Greeks, because it was an unwinnable war, logically. One family with less than 10 men against a world superpower. When Alexander the Great, Alexander Macedon, had unified all of Greece and conquered pretty much the known world, all of the inhabitant area of Europe, all of the Middle East, all of North Africa, all the way, most of southern Russia, all of India, into China. When he died, his kingdom was split into, I forget if it was 4 or 5, I think it was 4 kingdoms. The Syrian Greeks were the Greeks that waged war against the Jews during Hanukkah. And it was the Hasmoneans, less than 10 men who were not warriors, they were Torah scholars. They all fought against an army of millions, trained in battle. And God made the most impossible miracle that they were defeated. The sages say that is just one of numerous examples throughout history how you know that the Jews are the light to the nations. They are God's chosen people because they testify that the truth of the Torah is from God and is the only truth. Because their existence is an anomaly. It's a miracle in itself over and over and over again. But still, the Kohanim of the Hasmonean house were exalted and saintly, righteous and pious. They brought about Israel's salvation in those days and the revelation of a miracle for all subsequent generations. Why then were they subject to God's attribute of strict judgment, which struck them down so harshly, killing them all and destroying all remnants of their seed? Indeed, it was God's will that this transpire so that all of Israel's generations learn and be fearful of violating the oath which God had made to David, to King David, that his household will serve as the kings of Israel for all time. And it came about that not a word of Jacob's testimony be false. For our father Yaakov told his sons in Genesis chapter 49, verse 10, before his death, and the scepter shall not depart from Yehudah, and the lawgiver from among his descendants, until Shiloh shall come, and to him people shall gather. Though there might be princes and judges appointed from other tribes, anointed kings were to be chosen from the tribe of Yehudah alone, only the tribe of Judah. The Hasmoneans were leaders of their generation and were without peer in Israel. They were as righteous and as pious as angels. How else do you get a miracle to where less than 10 men who aren't even trained soldiers defeat an army of the world's superpower? Millions of soldiers. And they feared entrusting the rule of their shattered people to the descendants of the house of David, who were less pious and righteous than they were. They were afraid that Israel might be harmed if they did so, and they therefore took glory for themselves, motivated only by their love of God, of their people, and of their land. God, however, did not think the same way, as the verse states in Psalms chapter 89, verses 36 and 37. Once did I swear by my holiness that I would not fail David. His seed shall endure forever. The decision of the Hasmoneans to take the kingship for themselves was an unintentional mistake, but God shows no favor in his judgment, and their righteousness was insufficient to save them. On the contrary, because they were righteous, God was even more stringent with them, for they had struck at the kingdom of the house of David and anointed kings who were not his descendants. The Ramban in his commentary on Parashat Miketz writes, and this was the punishment of the Hasmoneans for having served as kings during the time of the second Bet HaMikdash, though they were exceedingly pious. And had it not been for them, Torah might have been forgotten in Israel. They were nevertheless severely punished. The four sons of the elder pious Hasmonean, Matityahu, reigned one after another, and each of them fell to the sword of the enemy despite their strength and success. In the end, their punishment was so all-encompassing that the point was reached that the sages declared one who says that he stems from the house of the Hasmoneans as a slave Herod had been a slave in the house of the Hasmoneans before he assassinated them and assumed the throne. They were all cut down for the sin of having reigned, though they were not from the seed of Judah and the house of David, having removed the scepter from Judah completely. They were punished measure for measure, for God caused their servants to rule over them, and their servants cut them down. Moreover, is it possible that they were also punished for having taken the kingship in view of the fact that they were Kohanim? For they were commanded in the book of Numbers chapter 18 verse 7, you shall guard your priesthood, all that concerns the altar. Ramban says they should not have served as kings, but should have restricted themselves to the divine service. In the Jerusalem Talmud, I saw Kohanim may not be anointed as kings. The verse in Deuteronomy chapter 17 verse 20 states, in regards to the kings of Israel, so that he might live long in his reign, he and his children in the midst of Israel. The Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 1 states, and the Kohanim and the Leviim, the tribe of Levi, shall have no portion. We can see from this how awesome is the divine judgment. For God shows no favor even to those who are righteous. Why is he so exacting? In order to fulfill his promise to David, his chosen one. If God is so exacting and so brutal in his judgment to those he provided a miracle of miracles for, to save his holy nation, what will he do to those who sin? Needless to say, those who come as thieves, and bandits, trying to steal a place in Israel and graft themselves on. Oh, what in the world? We didn't bring Mesilat Yesharim. We have to go get something real quick. Okay, broke. It's raining outside. There's a vine growing. Mesilat Yesharim, chapter 11, the specifics of the virtue of cleanliness. There are many traits of character and human personality, and for all of man's worldly actions, there are an equal number of character traits from which man's actions are derived. It's just as we have focused on those mitzvot that require more cleansing because they present greater stumbling blocks for people, so will we accordingly speak about the primary traits of character in greater depth. Because of their prevalence in our lives, these are pride, anger, envy, and lust. All of these are harmful traits whose destructive effects are recognized and universally acknowledged that proofs are not necessary. We went over one earlier. Yerovam ben Nevat. He suffered from envy. I talked about it on the stream last week. Jealousy, lust, and envy remove a man from the world, from this world and eternity. The sages say there's only one thing we're allowed to be jealous of, and that's spiritual matters. They are harmfully both intrinsically and in their outcome. All of them function outside the parameters of intelligence and wisdom, and each one by itself has a capacity to lead a person to severe transgressions. Referring to pride, Scripture explicitly cautions us in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verse 14, and your heart will be proud and you will forget the eternal your God. Meaning that if a person is proud, immediately they forget God by acting counter to his commandments. Referring to anger, the sages of blessed memory have said, whoever gets angry should be regarded by you as though he's engaged in idolatry. About envy and lust, we clearly learned in Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, Mishnah 21. Envy, lust, and the pursuit of honor remove a person from the world. For this reason, the analysis that is required in these areas is for the sake of fleeing from them and whatever stems from them. For they are, each and every one of them, deviant offshoots of an alien vine. We shall now proceed to discuss them individually. Adherents to the New Testament think that they will be the ones that inherit the earth. As King David says in Psalms, the humble shall inherit the earth. But anyone that learns and picks and chooses, anyone that disagrees with even one tiny thing that the sages teach is certainly not humble. That is the height of gava, the height of pride. I think we should just cut straight to the chapter on humility. Because that will show us the truth. I think it's chapter 22 here. Through analysis, we will discover that humility is dependent on both thought and deed. Before one can act in accordance with humility, one must have humility of thought. One who attempts to be humble in deed without first cultivating inner commitment toward humility belongs to that class of pseudo-humble and evil people mentioned above, whose hypocrisy is greater than any evil found in the world. The greatest evil. Ramchal says, wisdom is what brings a person to conceit and haughtiness more than anything else, because it derives from a noble quality that is inherent in the person himself, the intellect. There is no such thing as a wise person who does not err and who does not need to learn from his peers, and quite often he will learn even from his students. It's time for viewer replies again. This poor soul left a comment on the anti-Israel protest prophecy stream, one on Thanksgiving Day. And at first I didn't catch what he was saying here. I just thought he's saying he learns. And he reads the Torah portion, he reads the Tanakh. Then I realized he reads Daf Yomi, and this is a goy, this is a Gentile. Reading the oral Torah is forbidden for a Gentile. Even if you're in the process of conversion, not allowed to learn oral Torah unless it's something specifically that your kosher Orthodox rabbi tells you this is acceptable for you to read. Which, unless you read Pirkei Avot and the Chumash and basic stuff on the conversion PDF, I should be in the description of this stream on YouTube, which I highly recommend everyone to download it and start buying and reading books. But chewing through books is not going to do anything without humility and without learning from Rabbi Reuben. Because without a rabbi to guide us, we are so far beyond lost, it's terrifying. I mean, it sounds like this guy sounds like he knows more than I do. I mean, I don't have enough time to read the Torah portion every day. It's a miracle if I could get through it at the end of the week. But I know that God is not a man. Baruch Hashem. I know that. I at least have some chance of not going to Gehinnom. But people, laziness is one thing. We have to fight our laziness to learn, but more than anything is to know that we are absolutely nothing, to humble ourselves, not just before God, before the sages, and to fear what they say. Because that's what God says in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17. You shall hear and you shall fear and you shall do no more wickedness in Israel after they execute someone who goes against the Sanhedrin. Looked at objectively, there is no place for haughtiness here. The type of analysis and contemplation previously mentioned are appropriate for any person who has a clear mind and one that is not warped. When all the above becomes clear to him, he can truly be called a humble person. We skipped a whole bunch to get to this point. Ron Cole spent the last page and a half rebuking us, telling us we're absolutely nothing, and everything that we think is of any value or any praiseworthy trait we have is absolutely nothing and only a gift from God or an absolute delusion. When all the above becomes clear to him, he can truly be called a humble person, one whose humility is internalized in his heart, which recalls what David said to Michal in the second book of Samuel, chapter 6, verse 22. And if I were to be even more lowly within my own eyes, our sages of blessed memory have said, how great are those who are lowly in spirit, For when the Bet HaMikdash was in existence, when the Holy Temple stood, a person would sacrifice a burnt offering and he would be credited for a burnt offering. He would sacrifice a meal offering and he would be credited for a meal offering. Yet he who was humble in mind is considered as if he had sacrificed all the offerings possible, as it says in Psalms 51, verse 19. The preferred divine service are those of a broken spirit. This is the praise given to the lowly in spirit, for they possess humility in their hearts and thoughts. Now we have to realize back in chapter 11, where we're at right now, Ramchal cuts off his, at least on the daily reading, we're just read from chapter 22, but Ramchal says he cuts off discussing the attributes of humility because it's so far away from even the attribute of cleanliness, which King David got to. I mean, King David talked to God. King David was king in Israel. King David, God wiped out the Hasmoneans because they sought to break God's promise. And King David only got the attribute of cleanliness. And there's still levels upon levels to get until we are truly humble people in chapter 22. And they also said, with reference to the verse, not because you are more numerous than all the nations does the eternal desire you, Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 7. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, to Israel, my sons, I desire you, for even when I imbue you with greatness, you diminish yourselves before me. I bestow greatness upon Abraham, and he said, I am but dust and ashes, Genesis 18, verse 27. I bestow greatness upon Moshe and Aaron, and they said, and what are we? Exodus 16, verse 7. I bestow greatness upon David, and he said, but I am a worm and not a man, Psalms 22, verse 7. All of this emerges from a truthful heart that will not be swayed by the virtues that one may possess. Such an individual knows very well that due to other shortcomings that are an inseparable part of him, his virtues will not elevate him from his state of lowliness, even with regard to those mitzvot that he does possess. He is yet to attain the ultimate goal. And even if his only shortcoming was that he was made of flesh and blood, born of a woman, that alone should suffice to equate him with his small worth and his inadequacies. And then he would realize how utterly inappropriate conceit is. Any virtue that he acquires is nothing less than a divine act of benevolence that has been done in his favor, even though he is by his very nature and physical makeup lowly and shameful. Therefore, he must thank the one who has graced him in this manner and humble himself before him all the more so. Anything that has a body, anything that has flesh, anything that was born of a mother, of a woman, is a human being, lowly and despicable, and certainly not God. Exalted and lofty, beyond all praise, holy of holies. But since people think otherwise, Amalek exists, and his name is not one, and his throne is not one. Since we're here, we're going to, with God's help, we're going to go through a little bit of the Torah portion this week. Parashat Miketz. It happened at the end of 2 years to the day. Pharaoh was dreaming that, behold, he was standing over the river, when, behold, out of the river emerged 7 cows of beautiful appearance and robust flesh, and they were grazing in the marshland. Miketz means the end. We learned from Rabbi Reuben that sages say it means the end of the punishment. There's always an end. When Hashem decrees a judgment on us, a suffering, the end is decreed the same day that the decree of suffering is. Now there's something that Josef is doing in this parsha, in this Torah portion, book of Genesis, chapter 41 through I think about 44. And Josef seems kind of cruel. And there's a lot of stuff going on in this Torah portion. If you want to know how to prepare for the end of days, this is where it starts getting real serious. The prophetic dreams about the 7 good years and 7 bad years. It's no coincidence that on average, the boom and bust cycles for the stock market and the economy in America since the turn of the century, maybe even before that, was an average of 7 good years and then a downturn, and then 7 good years and then a downturn. Also, another way that you can know for sure that we are in the end of days is we're on like an endless float for the last 16 years. 2007 was the last crash. There should have been one in 2014. Like 10 years ago, we're overdue. But Joseph gets made viceroy of Egypt. And Pharaoh puts him in charge, so he is in control of absolutely everything. And the only thing that he outranks Joseph by is by the throne. He gives him his signet ring, which allows Joseph to do whatever he wants. And the only reason Egypt survives the famine is because of Joseph. Because they put all their trust in a righteous Jew. Genesis 41, verse 33. This is Joseph speaking to Pharaoh after the dreams. Now let Pharaoh seek out a discerning and wise man, and let him set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed, and let him appoint overseers on the land, and he shall prepare the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance, and let them gather all the food in those approaching good years. Let them amass grain under Pharaoh's control, Pharaoh's authority for food in the cities, and safeguard it. The food will be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that will befall the land of Egypt, so that the land will not perish in the famine. The matter appeared good in Pharaoh's eyes and the eyes of all his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, "Could we find another like him, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" Verse 40. You shall be in charge of my palace, and by your command shall all my people be sustained. Only by the throne shall I outrank you. He also had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed before him, Avrek. Thus he appointed him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without you no man may lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Joseph was a big shot, but he didn't become arrogant. It kind of seems like it in some of the verses with what he does to the brothers. But we had an amazing Hidush, an insight on this parasha, and it proves what the sages teach. The sages teach that God brings blessing to the world only because the righteous Jews have fulfilled the Torah. That's the only reason rain descends, bread grows, and we have food to eat. The only reason there's any blessing is only because of the Jews that follow the Torah. Chapter 41, verse 53. 7 years of abundance that came to pass in the land of Egypt ended, and the 7 years of famine began approaching, just as Joseph had said. There was a famine in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And then later on, where is it here? Here we go, verse 57. We'll start in 56. When the famine spread over all the face of the earth, Joseph opened all the containers and sold provisions to Egypt, and the famine became severe in the land of Egypt. All the earth came to Joseph to buy provisions, for the famine had become severe in all the earth. We got to go over notes. We got it written down here. What in the world? There we go. What in the world? Please bear with us here. It's just a wonderful, wonderful verse. 42, verse 6. Gosh. Now Joseph was viceroy over the land. He was the provider for all the people of the land. Joseph's brothers came and they bowed to him face to the ground. He was the provider to all the people of the land. The Hebrew is Kol Am Haaretz, to all the ignorant people. Everyone, all the idol worshippers, all the heretics, all the people that think that they're smart, everyone that scoffs at the Torah observant Jews. The only reason they all eat is because of Joseph and those like him. So wonderful. I used to hate this stuff just deep down in my rotten heart. That's why it's really, as King Solomon says, Musar is our life. And without it, the truth will seem like rotten evil. When it's us, we are rotten. We have to change. And if we beg God for help and we keep doing what the rabbi says, eventually we will see that everything the sages say is true. Yoshke, Yeshu, Jesus Yimak Shemo V'Zikro is in Gehinnom, boiling in feces because he went against the rabbis. He spoke against the oral Torah. He was the Amaretz. Now, there's a wonderful thing that we saw. Someone on WhatsApp pointed this out. And we read this, but we forgot it in the commentary on the Art Scroll Perkei Avot, the big green book. It's in Book of Genesis, chapter 42, verse 21. After the brothers come to Egypt to buy grain, and Josef is putting them through the ringer. Now, anyone that reads this should be thinking, why is Josef doing this? He seems so cruel. Then they then said to one another, indeed, we are guilty concerning our brother inasmuch as we saw his heartfelt anguish when he pleaded with us, and we paid him no heed. That is why this anguish has come upon us. Ramban asks, where is this? Where is this statement? Because it's not in the verses at all. Where is it here? Genesis 37, verses 23 through 28. You go and read through it. It's nowhere to be found. 23. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into the pit in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, intending to rescue him from their hand and return him to their father. And so it was when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the fine woolen tunic that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into the pit. The pit was empty, no water was in it. They sat to eat food. They raised their eyes and saw, and behold, a caravan of Ishmaelim coming from the Gilead, their camels bearing spices, balsam, and lotus on their way to bring them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what gain will there be if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelim, but let our hand not be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. His brothers agreed. The Midianite men, traders, passed by. They drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelim for 20 pieces of silver. Then they brought Joseph to Egypt. Nowhere does the Torah, the written Torah, nowhere does it say Joseph made a peep. Not one sound. From here is one of many, many places we learn that there is so much that we don't know without the help of the holy Jewish sages. We are absolutely lost, and we would miss everything that will help us go to heaven. Ramban comments that once a person's heart is twisted by the evil inclination, by the Yetzirah, their ears become deaf to the truth. So even though, as the brothers here say, Joseph did cry out and beg to them, but while it's happening, they don't hear a word. All they can focus on is the sin in front of them. Even though the brothers had a good intention, and even though it turned out for the best, because it was God's will, still they were blinded by the Yetzirah, even for if only for a moment. And even because their intentions were good, because they sought to remove Joseph from the family because they thought he was a risk to their divine mission. They thought he was the dreamer, the false prophet. They didn't realize that he was the one that would save them because they didn't go to the rabbi. They didn't learn. They went on their own opinion. Their hearts sank, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" Joseph set them up. Why is he doing this? See, Joseph knows a great secret. Joseph knows the entire Torah. Yaakov Avinu, the patriarch Jacob, taught him everything because he was the shepherd, the stone of Israel, in the descent of the exile of Egypt. And he knew that the brothers needed to do teshuvah. They needed to repent. But repentance is not just stopping the sin. Repenting is to learn about all the details of the sin and how severe it is. And then to do a tikkun, a rectification, to fix everything that we did wrong and to fix ourselves. We have to suffer. That's why God does horrendous things to people. And one of the near infinite reasons why the New Testament and any belief in it is so rotten and evil is because it says a man died for your sins, so therefore you don't have to do anything. It says God changes. When anyone who opens their eyes can see that it's clearly not the case. God is still the same God from the beginning. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. In the beginning of God's creating the heavens and earth. God does not change. And God makes us suffer so we can fix our rotten souls. Because sins create a damage. And there's so much wonderful commentary in this version of Mesilat Yesharim, this big one that we have that we don't read too often, but there's one commentary by look at Sichot Musar by Rabbi Isaac Shur. And he says, in order to demonstrate to a person that they don't know the truth, that they're wholly insufficient and incomplete, and they're completely blind. He says, in order for a man to demonstrate to himself that he is indeed blind and he walks in this world with willful blindness, he must begin to grasp a bit at the edge of the trait of watchfulness, of vigilance, to guard from sin. He says, which is contemplation. When he just barely begins to contemplate, he will already realize his dire situation. Behold, his eyes will already be open to see that he does not know all that he needs to know, nor feels all he needs to feel, and that his status in all matters of the service of God is as a blind man in need of healing to restore his vision. Thus, contemplation leads to further contemplation. It brings him to the category of a seeing person with brighter vision, clearer and more penetrating. Meaning, all the person has to do is just begin to think and contemplate their actions and how many sins they may possibly commit and what they need to do to rectify these things. And he says, instantly, a person will realize that they're solely and sorely deficient in what they need to know. This is what I realized a few years ago. What motivated me to start really paying attention, not just watching, chewing through Rabbi Reuben's lectures, but like okay, what is he saying? He says that I have to do this thing. I have to do it. And I started getting like an anxiety that, okay, now I understand. I've reached Binah. I have Hokmah. Now I reached Binah. I understand there's a lot to know. And I don't know anything at all. And I'm terrified because I know for sure I commit so many sins, even though I don't want to. I wanted to, like, I was already doing Teshuvah for a while for a couple things, but I started to realize that I am solely deficient in my vision, in my knowledge. He says, that's good. That's excellent. Don't worry. As long as you feel like that and you learn and you apply what you learn, Baruch Hashem, Ishtabak Shemul Ad, everything will be wonderful. But just know, there's no end to learning. There's no, especially not to learning Musar. The more Torah we learn, the more wisdom that we attain, it is vital that we learn Musar. Because we are spiritually sick people. For in truth, the evil inclination is very powerful within man. Without a man's knowledge, it advances and strengthens over him and comes to rule over him, even if he employs all possible strategies in the world, but does not take the medication created for it, namely the Torah as I wrote, not the New Testament, not Greek ideology, not anything other than the Torah and the tradition of the Jewish sages. He will not know nor feel the intensification of his illness until he dies in his sin and his soul will be lost. To what can this be likened? To the case of a sick person who consulted doctors. They recognized his illness and prescribed for him the healing medication, but he, without any prior knowledge of medicine, disregards their medication and instead takes whatever medicine that occurs to him. The doctors give him a very specific prescription. You take these pills, you go to the pharmacist, they'll give you a bottle, read the instructions carefully and do exactly what it says. And when it's gone, if there's refills, fill it and do it again and again and again and again. Will this sick person not certainly die? So too in our case, for no one recognizes the illness of the Yetzirah, the evil inclination, and its powers, except for the Creator who created it. And he himself cautioned us that the only remedy for it is the Torah. We got to go. Now, the sages take for granted that we are Amma Eretz. We are Amayat Eretz, so we're ignorant people, and we don't know everything that they're alluding to in their teachings. And they don't always, in the translation and commentary, give a source for everything, but Baruch Hashem, we learned this a while back. Book of Genesis, real early on, God gives us a cure. Tells us we don't need anything else other than the Holy Torah. Certainly not any man god Yoshke jumping Jesus on a pogo stick. Book of Genesis chapter 4 verse 7. Surely if you improve yourself, you will be forgiven. But if you do not improve yourself, sin rests at the door. Its desire is toward you, yet you can conquer it. If we do tshuva, if we improve our ways, then there is hope. Then we will be forgiven. But if we do not, if we delude ourselves into thinking anything other than the absolute unvarnished truth, and certainly thinking that some God, some dude died for our sins, sin rests at the door. Its desire is toward you, yet we can conquer it. And the sages teach that one sin leads to another sin, and the end is eternal hell, Gehinnom. So if a person does not awaken from their stupor, their coma of cozy fake lies, and see and accept the truth and start learning and doing what the Torah says, they have absolutely no hope. Will this sick person not this sick person certainly die? So too in our case, for no one recognizes the illness of the Yetzirah and his powers except for the Creator who created it. And he himself cautioned us that the only remedy for it is the Torah. Who then will abandon it? Take something else instead and expect to live. Only a fool. Certainly the darkness of the physical world will advance and strengthen over him level after level without his realizing until he finds himself immersed in evil, so distantly far from the truth that even thoughts of seeking the truth will not enter his mind. The commentary says he emphasizes 3 points regarding the evil inclination. It is very powerful by its own essence. 2, without his knowledge, it advances and strengthens over him. 3, afterwards, it rules over him. A man errs and does not notice 2 and 3, which occur without his knowledge. This is what he continues. He will not know or feel the intensification of his illness, corresponding to number 2, until he dies of his sins and his soul will be lost, corresponding to number 3. Rav Erlinger says, will not enter his heart. If a man sins and repeats it, the sin becomes permitted to him. The sages ask, permitted? What do you mean? Rather, it is as if it is permitted. Behold, it is clear that it reaches the point where it becomes like permitted in his eyes. He truly feels the sin is permitted to him. A person sins 2 or 3 times and he's not punished immediately. Without learning Torah and Musar, a person is reduced their fear of sin to the point where it's no longer. Here, the translator, Rav Josef Sebek says, he becomes more and more earthy, and less sensitive to spiritual matters like sin and fear of God. The sin dulls a person, just completely stupefying them to where they have no spiritual perception. They're chewing on the rat poison of the New Testament, thinking it's the truth. And there is truth in the book if it's got only Testament in there. There is food in there. Like you look at the rat poison. It's got seeds and little bits of grain. It's food. And the rats eat it. But it's full of poison and death. But the blind person who is spiritually numb because of their sins, because they have not done a self-accounting, because they think some dude died for their sins when he died for his own sins. It says so in the book of Leviticus. Chapter 18 is the warnings. Chapter 20 is the punishments. His blood shall be upon his own head. The prophet Ezekiel confirms in chapter 18 of the book of Ezekiel. A person dies for their own sins. But he deludes himself. He chews on this rat poison, thinking it's good, bringing it back to his nest, stuffing it until he's fat and lazy. Not physically lazy, spiritually lazy. He can learn and learn and learn, but in his gava, in his pride, he has he has Chokmah, but he has no Binah, and he certainly has no Da'at. He has no understanding or knowledge. And therefore his wisdom is like a poison. Even though it could be the truth, if it is contaminated with the poison of the New Testament or with heresy or with any other filth, it is death to him. And then, unless he opens his eyes and realizes the truth and stops chewing on this rat poison, he will, God forbid, die of his sins after squirreling all this poison away. May God have mercy on us all, to help us to continue to learn, to see, and accept the truth, and allow all our efforts in Q to help other people see the truth and stop chewing on rat poison. There's links to some excellent lectures from Rabbi Reuben that go over this topic, especially Hanukah and the evil Greeks and what they did. And the thing is, when, like Rabbi Reuben says, the only reason that heresy and idolatry and anything keneged Hashem, anything against the one and only God exists, is because people are lazy and they don't learn with the intent to do. Because that guy that learns Daf Yomi, a goy that learns Talmud every day, he will be punished most severely, because the point in this world is that we should learn to fear God and do what he says, which is everything the sages say, as they are his generals. And if a person is not fulfilling their purpose, that means they will be punished. And a goy that learns oral Torah, especially without a kosher source to learn from, they will for sure be punished, because they will make incorrect assumptions, or they will not apply anything that they learn, and they fail to realize that the purpose of this world is to serve God, not to make up your own religion, not to make the sin of Yerovam ben Nevat. It would be bad enough if a person just read a phone book or memorized an encyclopedia every day. A person will be punished for that, because that is not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to learn and fulfill the Holy Torah, either as a Gentile or, with God's help, one day may he have mercy on us and allow us to fulfill it as a Jew. Thank you for learning with us. May Hashem bless you. And please, like we mentioned in the last stream, like the lectures, comment if you can, share the streams, and especially subscribe and watch Rabbi Reuben's lectures. Study, pay attention, take notes, as if, not only as if your life depended on it, which it does, and your eternity depends on it, but act like God is there. Because if you take it seriously, God is right there with us, writing in the book of remembrance, for those that fear his name.